Hey everyone on the internets, what's up? I'm Shira Lazar, your host, and we're thrilled to be coming to you for our second day live from YouTube on Main Street, right in the heart of Park City. How's everyone doing today? Yes, we actually have an audience. This is amazing. So they'll be actually reacting to things. So some of you might know me from my day job as host and creator of the YouTube channel What's Trending, where I bring you the very best of today's viral videos and the latest trends on YouTube. Check it out, youtube.com/whatstrending. But more about me later. This is not about me. This is about all these amazing filmmakers and Sundance, because we are live at Sundance, a daily 1-hour show bringing you the very best of the fest. Event coverage, premieres, panels, excerpts from films, shorts, and all the behind-the-scenes info you want. I'm not alone, however. Coming in the host chair, replacing me, is Casey Neistat. Oh, he's a YouTube sensation. The 20th and 22nd, he'll be here. Jimmy Conrad, host of Kick TV Live, will be here the 23rd and 24th. So you have a mix of everyone here on Live at Sundance. Now, on today's show, we'll put a spotlight on what we're calling 1-hour film school, where we're bringing you real professionals giving real advice on all aspects of filmmaking. So as each of our guests join me on set, make sure you ask a question. We want to hear from you. This is what it's all about. It's a conversation. Use the hashtag Sundance and hashtag live for the chance to win, or you're going to win a chance for me to say your question. I'm like, what am I giving away something here? I'm actually on my phone right now taking your question. So literally whatever you ask, as long as it's smart and appropriate, I will ask those questions to the filmmakers here. Also, please join us in the chat room. We want to hear from you. So for all of you that are dying to be here, we wanted to share some of the sights and sounds that is downtown Park City. Let's take a live look out on Main Street to our window shot and check out what's going on. Oh, I see it's a bit quiet. There were a lot of parties going on last night. I was stuck in line for like an hour. So people aren't lining up outside anymore. They're lining up, for their post-drinking morning snacks. But seriously, I mean, everyone's having a blast here, a ton of amazing films, and of course, a lot of great parties. YouTube was taken over by some great parties with Vice actually right here last night. But enough with that, let's get back to business. We all pay close attention to the images on the screen. It's really integral to what we all do, and the person often most responsible for those images is the cinematographer or director of photography. And yesterday we went on a walk and caught up with Ben Kasulki, who shared his passion and perspective on being a cinematographer. Let's take a look.
I mean, when I was young, I was fascinated by films. I was fascinated by movies, and I grew up in the '80s, and it was like the kind of golden era of event movies. So there's that sort of childhood sense of wonder and magic, and that idea that cinema was pulling off the miraculous is really interesting. You might start out and be shooting every single weekend with a new group of people that wants to do a short film, and maybe you do 10 to 15 of them in a couple months, and maybe 3 are great, maybe 5 are okay, maybe 5 you had a horrible, horrible time on, and no matter what, all across the board you've learned something. I would approach a project and think, does the world really need this story? Is there something in this that's universal? Is there something in this that's specific and has a voice and has some passion to it? My sort of stress to anyone starting out is just, if you want to shoot, shoot. If you want to direct, just come up with projects and direct them. And there was a moment, an on-set moment, on the second or third day of shooting Guy Madden's movie Brand Upon the Brain, where we were screening dailies on film. And we shot the film on Super 8. And it was the first time that we were going to see any of our dailies, and it was my first experience shooting with Guy, which was nerve-wracking because he has this whole body of work that's really intimidating as a cinematographer. The dailies looked exactly like I wanted them to. The aesthetic choices that we made were right. The technical choices I made were right. Working with a crew that seemed to be very happy. Everything seemed sort of in a balance, and I was like, this is what I should be doing. This is what I'm going to do for a very long time. Really, the common language that I find I have with a lot of people is cinema. Like, everybody that wants to make movies knows what they want their movie to be like. Anyone that's going to make a feature has 3 films. They have the film they write, the film that I'm lucky enough to help them shoot, and then the film that they end up with at the end of their edit. If I can help them take the film that they've written and give them the most versatile version of the film that we shoot to take into an edit, then I've done my job correctly.
what a cool piece to see. And Ben has such a great look, doesn't he? And he's such a cool looking guy too. And I really do have respect for all the cinematographers out there and what they do with the camera. And speaking of talented folks, I'm now joined by a couple of my director friends. We're already friends. We just met, but we're already great friends. Peter Salad of Raising Victor Vargas and Nick Honor's Infinite Playlist, as well as Kyle Patrick Alvarez, director of COG. Welcome, guys.
Hi.
How's
Thank
it
you.
going?
Thanks for having us. Great.
Did you guys know each other before?
No.
You just met?
Yeah.
Well, you're a veteran of Sundance. You came here years back with your short.
Yeah.
So tell us about now what it's been like working with the Institute, with the festival, and obviously moving into the feature world from your short.
It's wonderful. It's a really rewarding homecoming. I was a writer at the lab years ago, and I always dreamed about returning, and I'm lucky that I get to do that.
Yeah, and you were here last year with your film, which, what a great story.
Yeah, it was my second movie. But my first movie didn't play here, so I kind of got both the experiences of like not getting to be in Sundance and getting to be in Sundance.
So what was that like for you? Let's talk about the experience as a filmmaker being here. I mean, it obviously doesn't get old. You know, while Sundance has been around for so many years, what is it like when you find out your film's going to be here and that experience as a filmmaker?
I mean, there's an immediate amount of security of like, okay, people are going to see your movie.
Yeah.
You know, there's at least that. There's always that when you're making something small and low budget, the fear of like, will this just disappear?
Yeah.
And it'll just be like, I made something for my friends. And so when you play here, you know you're going to have like a great audience, like a receptive audience, but also that the industry it's going to get exposure to. I mean, it's really, I think for American filmmakers, the only kind of thing like it. I mean, there's a lot of other film festivals, but in terms of what this gives you for your film's exposure, which is the goal, it's unparalleled.
How has the landscape changed for you, having been here so many years?
Well, I think it just keeps growing and growing. It
Yeah.
doesn't. I mean, it gets bigger every year, and every year I come back and sort of assume that it's reached critical mass, and it hasn't. So and who knows, where it goes from here? But thank God for Sundance, because I don't know where American movies would be without it.
Now we're actually taking your questions live. We got one, and this is a great one from Max Mooney. Remember, tweet using the hashtag Sundance, hashtag live, who asks, how do you find the right balance of objective and subjective shots within a film?
Oh, I mean,
This is like
This
great.
guy's going straight for the
Yeah,
technical.
that's-
I love that
let's
question.
go into the tech.
That's what I lose sleep over.
Yeah.
Every day. I mean, I feel like the most important not the most important question, but in the top 3 questions as a director, I ask myself is like, who is the camera in the scene? And it's just about knowing. It's like, how are you asking the audience to engage? If you're working with a more objective camera, you're letting the audience kind of decide what point of view they're going to have. So it depends on how much you're willing to challenge them or put the scene more front and forward in their face, whereas because subjective camera work, you're saying this is your point of view as the audience. This is what you're supposed to look at because you're the eye of either an invisible character in the room or the eye of one of the characters themselves.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I've always tried doing a mix of them depending on the scene. I've done the like wide, long, like 12-minute takes, and I've done the close-up, handheld type work too. And it depends on the moment. And I think just trusting your gut of what you think the audience, how they should be watching the scene.
And experiencing it. What do you think?
If the question is, and I think his question was, what's the right balance?
Yeah.
And there is no right balance. I mean, I like things to be as subjective as possible because I think it's a way to bring people into the scene. But there's really no right or wrong answer to that. And I think the way that one finds that balance or defines that balance is is the thing that gives you your individual style as a filmmaker.
Now, you're both writers, but then you've also directed movies that you haven't written. So what is that like, that experience versus obviously writing and then directing it and being part of that process?
For me, both my films were adaptations, but the writers were involved, but involved in a way of support as opposed to trying to micromanage the process. I'm working on something now I didn't write, and it's a different experience. I don't know, it's weird. At some point I have to, because I've always, the line between directing and writing has overlapped, and editing. It's always been all kind of the same thing. And when you make it more distinct, it's just a different experience. I wish I could quantify it, but I haven't been there yet since both films I've written so far. But this one I'm working on now is I haven't. So I'll be able to answer that question next year, hopefully.
If it was a good experience or not. Okay, Peter.
It's a different deal. I mean, directing the thing that you wrote versus something that somebody else wrote is. It's a different ballgame a little bit. I mean, obviously, when you're there as an interpretive artist, as opposed to somebody who actually created the material, you have the benefit of speaking of subjectivity and objectivity, you're objective about the material, and that can be really clarifying in a way. But when you write something and it comes out of your imagination, to share that with people, especially if they happen to like it, it can be a particularly rewarding experience.
Yeah, because I know with Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist, I mean, that's something you did bring in, obviously, your own experiences, even though you didn't write it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So can you speak of that as a director?
Yeah, I mean, it's it was very good for me to do that, in the sense that it was clarifying to me about what a director is and how much influence you can have over a piece of material even if you didn't write it.
Yeah.
And how much of your voice and point of view you can inject in there under the text. There's that line, they don't pay us for the. Have you heard this? They don't pay us for the text, they pay us for the subtext.
Oh, I like that.
I like that.
If the text is already there, then you're directing the subtext. And you
I've
realize
just never heard the pay part before. That's
the pay part. It's like an old Hollywood,
He's learning.
honey, I've been in this for 30 years. Yeah. But somebody told that to me, and that's what I learned.
That's true.
Directing somebody else's material.
Well, let's talk about the pay part, the budget. Small. You've obviously worked in small budget films. Both of you. I've worked in small budget a lot too, with web stuff.
Yeah. Look at the set. I mean, this is not one of those deals.
We have many people putting up that wood. I mean, there's a lot of wood there, chopping it. I actually did some of the chopping myself.
I hope you.
Splinters everywhere.
Look out for it. I'll give you a tetanus shot at the end of the talk.
So let's talk about approaching, obviously thinking big while having a small budget, and obviously approaching, huge writers and huge actors, and how do you go about doing that?
I mean, I think it's just never letting your ambition, for me, it was like I spent 3 years trying to get David Sedaris, trying to just get in touch with him and spend time and see if I could get a yes from him, and he'd never said yes to a filmmaker before, but my approach was to never, you never want your ambition to make you ugly. You never want to be like that guy who you never want to embarrass yourself. But for me, I couldn't get through to him, so I went to a book reading of his to reach out to him, to meet him. But that just butted up to the line where and all I said was
stalkerish.
Yeah, it wasn't. But you know what I did? I just handed him a copy of my first film, and I just said, I would love for you to watch it if you like it. As opposed to being there and immediately trying to pitch him when there's 200 other people waiting to sign his books.
Yeah, I give you credit. I mean, that story is, I read that story, and it's an amazing story, because in the end, it's still old school, just like if you hustle the grind, right?
Yeah, it was terrifying for sure.
Do you have stories like that where you were just after
Stalking
people?
celebrities?
Maybe, yeah. Let's talk about the celebrity stalking.
I'm not at liberty to discuss an ongoing legal situation. But we should move on to the next question.
No,
I don't know. I haven't had to do a lot of stalking of people. I mean, I've done a bunch. I mean, it's you can fall in love with the vision of somebody being in your film and pursue that, and sort of start texting them and tweeting them. No, I don't know what I'm.
You had the tweeting thing. That was
I haven't tried that. I haven't tried that yet.
Messaging, mutual friends.
Yeah.
I think you have to I think the question you have to ask yourself in those regards are, it has to be beneficial. Obviously, it's beneficial to you if you want this person in your film, but what is the benefit to them? And that's a question I don't think sometimes people ask enough. What's in it for them? What are they going to get out of it? Especially with actors, what is the role something they haven't done before, or something that'll feel fresh for them, or something more challenging than what they've done, or make them see people in a new light. If you have that, then they'll have vested interest when you do finally get in touch, even if it takes years to get through.
Yeah.
I mean, I think sharing that that's really the adult. That's a much better answer.
That's a much more mature.
That's the real answer.
Response.
But I think the deal is that between an actor and a director, it's a very that relationship requires a great deal of trust.
Yes.
And anything you can do to demonstrate that you are a trustworthy individual, that they should lend their likeness, their art, their craft to the film that everybody's trying to make. Anything you do to make that more comfortable for them, I think, makes it a more appealing endeavor for them.
And also, I feel like some big actors, they have their mainstream projects, but they do want to do some stuff that's more of a passion project, right? That they really believe in, that allows them to demonstrate certain skills that they don't typically show the public, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's actually head to the couch. We have some night fellows here who are going to be asking some questions, filmmakers themselves. So ask away. What do you have to ask our great guest today? Welcome.
Well, I guess my first main question is when you guys are talking about you guys write your own scripts and also directed the film. When you write your script, when you write your first draft, do you put price tags on things? like I like to like sometimes I get ideas that I think are like very cool, but I'll be like, no, I'm not gonna put that because it seems very expensive. And is that something that you think I should like overlook until, you know, maybe like later on that I'm just like, oh, I definitely cannot make this, like.
I mean, you know, the idealist in me wants to say to that. The idealist wants to say, write what you feel and write what your heart is. But I think the truth is, the ultimate goal is to make something, right? If we're talking about independent film here, you know, we want to get it made. You want to have the final film done. So I think it's about knowing what you have access to, what you can do. You know, but I think it's to me, what I do is I split myself down the middle. I have those projects, I have those dream projects that like I would love to do one day.
Yeah, of course.
And I have them, and I contribute to them, and I work on them, but I do put them aside, and I focus on the things of like, okay, I know I've got an apartment and a severed head. What am I going to do with it? You know, like those sort of things. And you ride around much. No, that's what Robert.
What kind of stuff are you writing?
That was Robert Rodriguez. He knew when he did El Mariachi, he knew he had like that prop. He knew he could get that prop, so he wrote in a dream sequence of that. You know, so it just depends on what the nature of it is. But the other flip side of that, I'll say, is you'd be surprised with what you can pull off. You know, the ambitious ideas. There are ways to either take those and mold them into a smaller budget, or think outside the box and present it in a way that maybe didn't seem possible initially. And I think sometimes that's as impressive as anything else.
Very cool. Thank you.
I disagree with my colleague. I disagree with my esteemed colleague on this one. I would write whatever you want to write because you don't know. I mean, and before doing exactly what he told you to do, because because you might write a great scene that's set in a ballroom. That's a great scene.
Yeah, of course.
That leads you into a great sequence. That's gonna live in the movie. That's gonna tell a chunk of that story. And I wouldn't want you to clip your wings before you write that out and see what you've got there. And then if it's great, then you can cross out ballroom and write living room.
Yep. Cool.
And
nice.
then you've skinned that cat. You know what I mean? You got the good material out of your head.
Cool.
And you can afford to produce it.
Cool.
Let's take another question.
Great. Yes, you talked about submitting before and not getting in. What did you do differently this time?
There's a sarcastic answer to that. No, I didn't do anything differently. I believe, and I say this respectfully to film programmers all around, having not been in festivals and been in them sometimes, there isn't as much of a trick to it, I think, as people. I liken it to college applications. Like, you know, eventually it just comes down to a small room of a group of people, and they've got thousands of them in front of them, and sometimes you're going to fit in, and sometimes you won't. And I'm just as proud of my first film. You know, I don't try to use the festival entry as validation of my work. For me, it's more the excitement that it can bring more attention to the movie. So I didn't do anything differently this time. I think it helped, you know, obviously that there was a familiarity with my work after my first film. But I also don't think that was the deciding factor. I think the movie that year fit. You know, and I think it's easy to sort of over-intellectualize the process, but it's a complex process of them fitting a lot of different pieces together of, well, that year maybe there was my first film was a phone sex movie. Maybe there was there wasn't, but maybe there was another phone sex movie, and so they only have room for one. You know, you don't know what it is, and there's things that have nothing to do with you or your film that ultimately sometimes play a bigger part in whether you get into a festival than the movie itself. And that sounds dry, but I think it's actually more encouraging, which is to say, don't put the fate of your own film in the hands of any programmer. And film programmers love film, and they want to see their good films succeed, whether they get into the festival or not. And it was Sundance programmers that helped my first film get into other festivals when it didn't get in here, because they liked it. It just didn't have a place, and so I was really grateful for that.
So we do have one Twitter question, and I want to encourage all of you throughout this entire 1 hour film school, tweet your questions for all our incredible experts and filmmakers, #Sundance, #live. This one comes from Kelsey O'Brien. What do you recommend for students trying to break into the industry now?
I'll let you go. I answered last.
Oh, Kelsey, break into the industry?
Yeah, or like people, like up and coming filmmakers or students breaking in the industry. I mean, obviously the industry's changing so much with digital and where films are headed and everything.
Well, I mean, it's a little bit of a broad question because I don't really know what she wants to do in the industry, but we can make let's make let's make the assumption that she wants to be a director.
She wants to be you.
Believe me, she doesn't want to be. And I don't want.
You might want to be here, Ed.
What's that?
I said you might want to be
don't
here.
want to go back to school?
Maybe you want to go back to
Come on.
school.
I want to be Kelsey.
Be back 20-something, not 20-something.
I think it's a tricky question. I mean, I think it's. I don't think it's. Maybe it's not such a tricky question. I think you just have to make something. You have to make something good.
By the way, I'd like to point out that when I was in school, we studied his short film.
I think, listen,
So,
that sounds like
listen to that
sounds
sincerely.
like a sort of, because there's a camera there and there are lights on me, that sounds arrogant, right?
But it's
because there's like the validation of us being on a film set, and people listening to us. But what I mean by that is, if you can find the time and support and headspace to keep making things on your own until you can make something that is representative of you and other people appreciate, I think that's really where the rubber meets the road, and people will take notice. Everybody's desperate to find a good film. People are very, very hungry for good stuff, and if you can make something that people respond to, then it's all going to come to you, really. You know, I mean, you don't necessarily need an elaborate strategy.
I think the last 15 years, especially of independent filmmaking, 10 years, has been the technical has gone away. I mean, the idea of, oh, well, you need short ends to make a movie. That's
not an
gone.
excuse anymore.
Yeah, it's not. No, there's access to
No.
like incredible cameras. I mean, really, cameras were used to be sort of the great divide in terms of what defined an indie. Now, the only thing that defines what a film is independent or not is budget, and sometimes people use story, but that's not usually the case. It's just what. Even then, it's just using budget. Always just nowadays, a movie's going to cost what it's going to cost. People don't ask that question. Used to be thrown around all the time. Well, what was your budget? I haven't been asked what was my budget in 3 years now. I think that's going away because a movie's just going to cost what it needs to cost to get made, and people are doing things with little amounts of money.
And iPhones. My favorite trip was an iPhone movie last year. It was great.
Yeah.
There you go. Anything is possible, even with iPhones or even iPads, or tablets, or anything. Well, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you giving all your insights and thoughts, and all of you guys for asking all those questions. Keep them coming. Peter and Kyle, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
There you go. Now, let's hear more thoughts on directing the actor from Maya Forbes, Richard Ayoade, and John Slattery during a panel filmed at the Sundance Cinema Cafe.
In these three films, all feature some, truly amazing performances by very talented actors. What was your process like working with your actors?
Zoe Saldana and Mark Ruffalo, they were such great collaborators. Mark and I, we did a lot of preparation beforehand. We did rehearsal, and for a year or so before, we'd meet whenever we could and sort of work on the character, talk about it. Mark, by the end, I felt like he knew the character better than I did, so I was very open to that, because he would say, no, I think he'd absolutely get out of the car here and open the door for her. And I thought, yes, I think you're right. He would have done that. Yes, he would.
When you really like the actors and feel they're really good, that's the best situation to be in. The worst situations you're ever in, if there's something wrong with the script, that generally I've found that every time you're sort of trying to persuade an actor to do something, you're generally always wrong, and that later you go, yeah, there was a reason why that wasn't working. Generally, I find actors their instincts are more or less completely right. And on the occasions I've been in things, you become aware of directions that are completely unhelpful or just transmitting your own terror, which is of no real use to them, I found out. What's the worst direction you've ever been given? What's the worst thing, the most unhelpful?
Just before he would roll the camera, I won't say who this is, he would roll the camera. It was an English director, and then he would creep up. You knew the camera was rolling, and you were just sitting there, and you'd see this large man creep up and whisper in your ear, "Turn the light on." And you'd be like, I'm sure all the dailies would start with, "What the fuck?" You know, if you can just sort of stay the hell out of the way, if the script is strong enough for them to, and you've had a discussion prior to standing there in front of the camera, so that you're not self-conscious, because of course they've just given you these clothes, you don't even know where the pockets are in the pants, and you're going, and you're talking about your dead daughter or something. It's something incredibly intimate, and I watched Phil a couple of times in this thing. He's relentless about wanting to know why. Well, why would he stay? Why would he do why? Just that kind of digging into the reason this person is standing there. And then having the courage and the self-knowledge to figure it out on camera. Like, not figure it out beforehand and go, I know how I'm going to do it, and then go do it. Like, literally be sort of standing on one foot you know, not really being sure, and then allowing it to happen in front of the camera. I mean, having that kind of emotional intelligence is you just standing there by the monitor going.
I would agree with that completely. I feel like the toughest scenes when Mark Ruffalo was saying, "Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this?" He was completely correct in that it was some vestige of some old script or some old version of something, and he was connecting very strongly to the fact that his character wouldn't be doing this in the moment. So I think if you have people you really respect and they are happy to go on with their instincts, you should follow them.
Welcome back to Live at Sundance from YouTube on Main Street. As you know, the Sundance Film Festival is all about celebrating the spirit of independent filmmaking, but that doesn't mean that producers are forgotten. In fact, the Sundance Institute has a creative producing fellowship and lab designed to nurture emerging producers. You can learn more about that and get involved yourself, sundance.org. And joining me now, speaking of producers, is Jason Berman, a producer of Love from Sundance 2012, and Helen Estabrook, a producer on Whiplash from this year's festival. Huge opening movie. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about what a big year for you guys. First Ashore, it was like the quickest turnaround we've seen. Pretty much. What is like, it's going to go down in the Guinness World Record books for short to feature.
It was great. No, we were really excited. I mean, the whole point for it to make the short was to make the feature. So to be able to do that and have the quick turnaround, and it was exactly as we hoped.
And tell us about the response this year from the film. A lot of people are talking about it. What's
God, it couldn't
like
be
for
better.
You as a producer?
Oh, I'm over the moon.
Yeah.
Seriously, my face hurts from smiling so much. I can't stop. I'm just, I'm so proud of our team. I'm so proud of our director and our amazing actors. And I sound like such a cliche every time I talk about it because I just can't stop.
Let's get out of the box at a cliche box.
I'm sorry,
Come on.
I can't. It's just too exciting.
Well,
So, yeah.
you've obviously been here with a movie, Love, which was something I've read was very close to you and the story.
Yeah, Love was a movie that was here a couple years ago, written and directed by Sheldon Candace, who I went to USC with, and I'm from Baltimore, and Sheldon's from Baltimore, and the story takes place in Baltimore, and in a kind of weird way as a love story to Baltimore, and kind of really follows a coming of age story from a 11-year-old's point of view. So it was amazing film and great experience, and this year here with a movie called Little Accidents, which written and directed by Sarah Colangelo, that went through the writers and directors.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
So tell me about that experience. As a producer, working on both of those films, how it was different for you.
Well, they were both, Sarah and Sheldon were both first-time feature directors.
Okay.
And they both actually had done short films that were also, somewhat based upon the subject matter and the themes of their features. I would say that it was the more interesting and complex thing about Little Accidents was that we shot in West Virginia, and so we shot in a place, and we shot with a subject matter having to do coal mining. That we had to build a lot of relationships with a lot of coal mine companies to be able to shoot at their property. So there was a lot more logistical aspects and relationship building that we had to do for Little Accidents that we didn't have to do for Love, because Love was shot in a place where we had grown up.
Yeah, and you had a lot of people you could ask favors from.
Exactly. You had all
Your parents,
the
I'm sure, were involved.
relationships. And when you're doing these independent films, for around $1 million to $2 million, you've got to stretch that dollar really, really far.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
So those relationships are important.
Oh, definitely. And let's talk about first-time directors. I'm sure there are a lot of people watching that are directors, and maybe they've worked on features or not. But as a producer, what advice can you give to first-time direcors?
Well, I think you sort of said it too. It's the short film. I think that's the best calling card. It's the way to see. Anyone who wants to be directing a feature should just try to find any way they can to direct at a few minutes of anything.
Yeah.
Whether it is directly related to what they actually want to do, or just showcases their talent and their voice.
Yeah.
I think that's sort of key.
Yeah, I mean, you learn by physically doing, and and doing it over and over again. And I think that's one of the great things about the Sundance Institute is they've got obviously the producers labs, the writers labs, directors labs, that when these projects go through the labs, they're really going through, anywhere from a 1 to 3 year process of really refining the projects. And so when the directors show up on set, the movie is in their head because they've worked with the Institute, they've worked with the mentors, they see it, and it just makes the process so much more efficient and easy for them and for their teams.
Yeah, and I'm sure getting a producer on board who have done really successful films, it's important. So how does a director get your attention and get you on board for their movie?
Damien, who directed Whiplash, got my attention from a student film he did called Guy and Madeline on Park Bench that I just thought was beautiful. But a lot of it is just,
or you finding the script sometimes and then finding the director.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For example, last year at Sundance, I was at an event that the Institute was hosting, and there was a filmmaker here by the name of Andrew Renzi, who had a short, has had 2 shorts in the festival. And it was a relationship that was actually introduced by somebody at the Institute, and then we produced his feature film Franny this past year. So it's really, it's introductions, and then just kind of really being in an atmosphere like Sundance where you get to meet filmmakers. And I think that's the great thing about Sundance is you're showing films, you're watching films, but you're also connecting with people.
Yeah, so we have some questions from the interwebs, #Sundance, #live. Some of these were for the directors, but I think you guys might be able to answer some of these things in terms of what talents and skills do you look for in crew members when you're also working with the directors. Maybe that's something you guys work with together.
Hardworking and a good attitude.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is just an excitement for the work too.
Passion, perseverance, and just a true understanding of the material. And the crew members come onto these movies. They don't make very much money.
Yeah.
A lot of times the movies are non-union too. So they've got to have a strong passion for the filmmaker and for the people involved.
Another one from Daniel Rucci. Curious about whether directors try to hold rehearsals before filming, weeks or months before a film is shot.
Well, it completely depends.
Yeah.
I think in my experience, every movie I've done has had a different rehearsal process. Do you feel?
Yeah, it is. For Little Accidents that we did with Sarah, there were a couple actors that she really got to work extensively with prior to shooting. One of them, Boyd Holbrook, who she was in the labs with, and then there were other actors on the film that kind of just she had some conversations with, but didn't get to fully work with them. So it really depends on the actor and their availability, and also if you have the budget to be able to put that kind of schedule together.
Definitely. Let's go to our night fellows for some questions now. How are you guys doing over there?
A little thirsty.
Yeah, it is dry here. It is Park City. Stay hydrated.
I have a question. You said you did a feature in West Virginia.
Yeah.
I guess coming from, working in a non-film town. It's not LA. I guess what are your challenges? What are the biggest difficulties, I guess, when you're working in a place that just has no concept of, really what you're trying to do?
There's when you show up at a place where there's not filmmaking all the time. There's definitely an excitement about having you in town, but at the same time, there's also an apprehension because depending on what the subject matter is, they want to make sure that if you're portraying their community, which we do in a lot of these independent films, that you're going to portray them in a positive light. So it's there's the pluses and negatives of it.
Cool.
But I think the positives outweigh the negatives because as long as you leave time to build the relationships, you're safe.
Great.
So speaking of relationships, how do you choose your projects? Do you do it based on your relationships with directors, or do you do it based on the scripts, or based on what the production requires?
You want to answer that?
I tend to be pretty director-based as far as I'm Jason Wrighton's producing partner. We have it's a director-based company, and so our excitement becomes for the filmmaker and the voice. And obviously, if there's a fantastic script, that's wonderful, But it is at least for me personally, it tends to be more director first.
Very nice. Well, we are so excited to have you here, and congratulations on Whiplash.
Thank you so much.
We're actually going to have Miles Teller and the director from Whiplash on our show tomorrow. So definitely stay tuned for that. Subscribe to youtube.com/SFF now. And keep on tweeting #Sundance, #live. Once again, I'm Shira Lazar, and we're broadcasting live from Sundance. How's everyone doing? Excitement. She supposedly has no more clothes. She's ran out of clothes.
I packed.
You're drinking a ton of water.
They just sold their movie.
You just sold your movie last night?
I can't talk about it.
What? We're breaking news here. Breaking ground. Breaking news here at Live at Sundance. That's why you're tired. You were in negotiations all night.
I love coffee.
All right, on that note, let's take another look out the window. Our window cam. Ooh, a lot of people walking around. It's sunny outside. Wow, fascinating. A lot of action happening over there. You want to give your thoughts about, Jason, about the action happening on the street?
Let's see, can they go back to that picture real fast?
Narration, give us
there's
some
not that-
narration.
I think everybody's down at the Eccles Theater, I guess.
Oh, really? What's going on at the Eccles right now?
I think they're about to show Infinitely Polar Bear.
Oh.
So.
That's getting a lot of
yeah,
buzz?
I think that's the Mark Ruffalo.
Oh, the Mark Ruffalo movie. Very cool. Well, thank you so much once again for joining us here. And up next, the fun continues on Live at Sundance. We're going to talk about the world of U.S. documentary filmmaking. Sundance Institute sat down with Tracy Draws-Tragos and Andrew Draws-Palermo to give you a peek inside their film, Rich Hill.
I had a dream last night about the festival, and that we walked into the theater and I was so disappointed because there was only 6 seats and only 2 people were there, and I knew both of them, and I was just like, dang it. Like, we worked so hard. There's only 2 people here. That was last night's dream.
My name is Tracy Draws-Tragos.
And I'm Andrew Draws-Palermo, and we are co-directors and co-producers of Rich Hill.
Rich Hill is about 3 boys in a town in southwest rural Missouri who come from low-income families and who are growing up and struggling to survive. We really wanted to kind of understand what it was like to live there now.
Oftentimes films about rural families or rural communities, they're not entirely respectful of the families. They kind of come in and get the most sensational material they can get and then leave. We really wanted our subjects to be the authors of this film. We really try to come from their perspective in a lot of ways.
People think that we're poor around here, but definition of poor is no roof, no lights, no water, no food. We have lights, we have water, we have a roof, we have food, we have money. We're not poor.
I think for me, the thing that I often think of is how amazing it is within these homes, even when they have so little. I think really once we got inside some of these homes and saw the love and how verbal they were and also physical with each other and loving, you know, and not afraid to say I love you and not afraid to hug each other, and I was just very touched by that. Sundance Institute was the first money in for our film as well, the first grant that we received, and it came at such an important time. It was sort of a make or break time for us and kept us going at an early stage, and I mean it was huge for us.
When you make a film or you write something, or it's about communicating something, having a dialogue with an audience. It feels great.
We are back live at Sundance from YouTube on Main Street, and what you just watched was a bit of Rich Hill, which is an example of the many different stories that are here at the festival. And speaking of great stories, I'm now joined by Franklin Leonard, film executive and creator of the very hot The Blacklist, a service that is changing the way filmmakers find some of the best undiscovered scripts. In fact, over 22 Blacklist screenplays have been made into feature films and have been nominated for 17 Academy Awards, winning 171. I think it was like 17, winning 35. That wouldn't make sense. 35 Academy Awards, that's pretty crazy. Welcome to the show. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
And you have someone with you?
And I'm joined today by Matthew Hickman, who is our 2014 Cassian Elwes Independent Screenwriting Fellow.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah,
it probably deserves, it needs a little bit of context. But,
Yes.
So for 9 years, we've been doing this survey of Hollywood executives that sort of represents the annual Blacklist. And that list is Hollywood's most liked unproduced screenplays.
Yeah.
And those numbers that you were talking about sort of come from that.
Amazing.
229 movies produced, 171 Oscar nominations. 3 of the last 5 Best Pictures were scripts that were on the list.
Really?
Yeah, The King's Speech, Slumdog Millionaire, and wow, I'm completely blanking right now. But anyway, it's had a lot of success. 2 years ago, we launched a website that allows anyone on Earth to upload their script to our website, have it evaluated, and if it's good, we tell the entire industry. And we've created a lot of opportunities sort of alongside that. We have a partnership with Warner Brothers for writers from historically underrepresented communities in the hopes of identifying those folks. And Cassian Elwes, who's a producer who I think has been involved in over 200 movies getting made at this point, came to us and wanted to find a way to mentor up-and-coming writers who were specifically writing scripts with an independent spirit.
Yeah.
And instead of sort of, giving someone money or, he wanted to be involved in a mentorship capacity and decided to fund a fellowship to invite one writer, Matthew, to the Sundance Film Festival and get to learn from someone who's been doing it for literally as long as the festival's been around. So here he is, and here we are, and it's exciting. It's exciting for me to get to sort of see the festival through brand new eyes.
Right.
This is my 10th year and his first.
So what's it like? So what are you showing him?
Well, first of all, you can imagine why, after hearing those things about the Blacklist and all the awards it's been nominated for, how psyched I am to be here, one, at all, and then two, with this opportunity. I mean, it's literally a dream come true. It's pretty wild. It's cold. I've never seen this much snow.
Where are you from?
I'm from Georgia, and
Okay,
right by
there
the
you go,
coast in Georgia. And we're having a good time. I mean, I've been seeing a lot of movies, and in between that, kind of getting a crash course from both Franklin and Cassian really on how movies are made, and just an appreciation for how it works for everyone who's not a writer.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Blacklist, the whole story behind it, I just find so fascinating, and what you've been able to do. So tell people how it all got started and how it grew to where it is today.
So I was working for Leonardo DiCaprio's production company, Appian Way, and by virtue of working for the production company of arguably the biggest star in the world, and on top of that, one who has rightly a reputation for good taste, you see every single screenplay that's being written. And the reality is that most of them are not of the standard that makes you want to run into your boss's office and say, cancel your date with your wife tonight, read this instead. So I was going on vacation for 2 weeks and I wanted to read some good scripts, so I took a survey of my peers and said, send me a list of your 10 favorite scripts from this year that haven't been produced. In exchange, I'll send you the combined list back. And slapped a sort of subversive name on it and went on vacation and came back and it had become a thing. But this was literally 2005, so in the realm of the interwebs, it's eons ago. And
it's being printed on paper. At
yeah,
that point.
no,
they're like, well, read it today.
Yeah, the idea of by 2010, the idea of a yearly email or a PDF that circulated via email was it was adorable, right? And so my partner Dino Siamic we decided to build something that was like a real-time Blacklist, and we realized that in addition to helping everyone in the industry, we could also sort of open a door to the industry for if you're a writer who lives in Sweden and you've written a screenplay, there's no easy way to get it to Hollywood, and we wanted to create an easy way to do that. And funnily enough, we actually had a writer from Sweden sell 2 scripts to a production company that's had 4 films at Sundance in the last 3 years. So we're trying to be a more perfect marketplace for material and a real way for people who are writing, no matter where they are, to close the gap between being an aspiring screenwriter and a working screenwriter to just being a good screenwriter.
And what is it? Obviously, what it takes to be on the Blacklist, it needs to be good. But you would think at this point, with what things you've chosen and then winning awards and all of this, studios would be like, okay, let's just hire. Well, I know you have deals with studios and all that.
But
it's just fascinating to me. They would look back and be like, what did we get wrong? But they continue doing the wrong thing.
Look, I think I think what's interesting about the scripts that are on the annual Blacklist, and also some of the scripts that do really well on our website, is that they're scripts that take a risk and they're very ambitious in the story they're trying to tell, and then they sort of exceed the bar that they set for themselves. And I think right now, in the film industry, there are enormous economic pressures on the studios, right? Domestic box office is flat, international box office is growing, but no one's quite figured out how to handle that yet. And the cost of making these movies at a studio level has gone up. So studios are getting more conservative, I think, in their approach. And what's been great about the Blacklist is that it gives a lot of these scripts a second life because you're highlighting stuff that it's like, look, on the face of things, a movie about a high school girl who gets pregnant and decides to give the baby up for adoption, probably not something you want to release, but if you make it and make it well, that movie could be Juno. And I think, same thing with The King's Speech, Here's a script about a guy who stutters, and the big triumphant moment is him getting through a speech without stuttering. Very few people reading that are like, this is box office gold. But if the script is really good and it's made by talented people,
anything's possible.
Anything's possible, and you have a better chance at making a great movie and being quite successful financially as well by, you know, it all starts with a story.
Definitely. We actually have a question from Twitter. Encourage all of you to tweet live. We'll ask your questions right now. Hashtag Sundance, hashtag live. This one comes from @Mariel M. Mayorga, who asks, what is your biggest fear as, I guess, filmmakers and experts in the industry?
What is your greatest fear? And because you're sort of on the beginning of what, you know, promises to be a burgeoning career. So like going into that, what is your greatest fear?
Failure.
Just like raise the bar,
that's probably
exactly.
the easiest way to answer that question ever.
I have fear of fear.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
only
very
thing we have is
palpable, and I think the thing that I'm learning from talking to people here who are kind of farther along in their careers than I am at this point is that doesn't really go away.
Yeah.
Maybe I have this opportunity here now, but even if I'm successful in getting work and you know, make a career out of it, you're still always going to be anxious about whatever it is that you're working on and the prospects of how it's going to do. And I think that'll always stay with me. But it's a great problem to have at this point.
Yeah, you could look at it one way or another, a glass half full, a glass half empty, right?
Yeah.
You can't look down.
Well, and the fear of failure, which I actually find crippling too, it's one of those things where I think failure is a good thing. You know, when you fail, you have the opportunity to sort of dust yourself off and get back up, and you learn from it.
Yeah, when
which
you
is
look back
all
at
super
it.
cliche. Yeah, not when you're in the middle of it, right? When in the middle of it, it's terrible. But after the fact, you say, you know what? If I hadn't failed, I might not have approached things differently the next time. And it's funny, a good friend of mine, Sarah Lewis, has a book called Rise coming out about exactly this subject. And I think she's getting into town tomorrow. But
that's very true. I mean, part of what you guys were saying a minute ago about smaller movies that might not necessarily seem like box office gold, like that was kind of borne out by my own experience and fear of failure, even with the Blacklist. The first time that I ever uploaded a script of mine to the Blacklist, it was like the antithesis of whatever you would call a Sundance movie. It was like a big, splashy studio movie that, you know, you would attach a lot of you know, action stars to, and I thought that was what I needed to do in order to give myself a chance, and they hammered it. And it took me a while to take that message to heart, but once I finally did and wrote something that was just something that I would only want to see, and I didn't know if anyone else would want to see it, that was when I finally got some results. And
What are going to be the biggest films at Sundance this year?
wow, no pressure. Whiplash, I saw Whiplash. It's excellent, and I'm very proud of my friend Helen Estabrook, who produced it, and Cooper Samuelson, who was involved in that too. I am very excited about Dear White People, produced by Lena Waithe and directed by Justin Simeon. But the honest answer is that I have no idea, and I don't think anybody that claims to know when they get here is telling the truth. Like, I think, you know, you have to sort of see the movie and know what comes of it. Another film that I saw last night that I was really impressed with was Fishing Without Nets.
Yeah.
The Somali pirate film, beautifully shot, incredibly acted by Somali actors who, I mean, we actually spent some time last night trying to figure out if they had any previous credits, and all signs point to no. But considering all of that, they made a really beautiful film that actually serves as a really nice companion piece to Captain Phillips. So.
yeah,
Nice.
absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for being here and stopping by.
No, thank you for
Both
having
of
us.
you guys, and of course, check out the Blacklist online. Upload your script.
Yeah, blacklist.com with no vowels, blcklst.com.
There you go. Next up, the fun continues from Sundance, from Live at Sundance. We're going to head down Main Street to the New Frontier exhibit, where creatives are actually redefining traditional boundaries of cinema. Let's go there right now.
New Frontier is a section of films and new media art that explore the boundaries and push the boundaries of traditional cinema in various ways. New Frontier exhibition is an exhibition of work that comes from photographers, designers, technologists, filmmakers, fine artists, all of which are engaging with the moving image and telling stories with the moving image in various ways. Well, what's new about New Frontier is that we've moved from the Yard to Main Street, and what's exciting about that is that we're all over Main Street. We're on 3 different locations of Main Street. Clip Collective is going to be projecting onto the Egyptian every night. Doug Aiken's brilliant installation called The Source is a 2,000 square foot pavilion that we've built for his 6-channel projection installation about the source of creativity, where he interviews luminaries, creative luminaries like Jack White, Tilda Swinton, James Turrell, about the source of creativity.
This project is a kind of ongoing project. It's a living artwork in a sense. You know, really I wanted to kind of strip away everything, strip away what's been made by these people and go back and really have a very candid, raw discussion about why it was made and where it came from.
We've got 2 feature films that are also transmedia projects. 52 Tuesdays, which we're featuring My 52 Tuesdays here at New Frontier, and the feature documentary Through a Lens Darkly that we're featuring the accompanying roadshow, the Digital Diaspora Family Reunion project here.
It's a place where we all gather together to become one family. And so people can upload their family photographs of families they choose, or their biological families or friends, and it becomes part of our Instagram campaign, and they could print out their family photographs right there in our installation.
Jacoby Satterwhite is a performance artist and fine artist. He works with computer game imagery and sexuality, also with club culture, all to explore sexuality in ways that engage with the gaming environment.
It's amazing, you know, I think how that program, that part of Sundance has really grown, and you know, I think it's also, it reflects how culture has grown and changed, and how the moving image has, you know, kind of reached this like very vital moment right now, where, you know, it's being ripped apart, it's being reshaped, it's existing in so many different platforms, and it's kind of a 1968 moment for cinema again, and it's very interesting to see all this experimentation kind of surface.
We're actually so excited to have Doug Aiken, who closed that piece, on the show Monday. You should definitely stop by his exhibit, The Source Evolving, at New Frontier. If you're in Park City, for those of you who aren't, you can see more of his conversation with on the New York Times, actually. And also, right here, youtube.com/SFF. Please subscribe. As our last guest for today, we of course have to discuss one of the most creative and final stages of filmmaking, post-production. I'm here with editor Michael Taylor, as well as composer Peter Golub. Welcome to the show. You're closing it off, so we saved the best for last. How's it going? How's Sundance treating you?
Great. I'm having a great time.
Fantastic.
Yeah, you've been here years.
I have.
Yeah?
Yep. Yeah.
And what's it like this year?
A lot of energy this year. A lot of really great films,
Yeah.
and a lot of stuff going on. And
So let's talk about the editing process. I guess, do you approach, you have to approach the process of each film differently. How much do you work with, you know, is it what you're bringing to the table coming in versus working with the director and them giving their take of like specifics to the editing process?
Right. I spend a fair amount of time with the director before we start shooting, trying to figure out what she or he is trying to achieve with the film. And then as they're shooting, I'm doing an assembly of the film, trying to do the best I can on any given scene. And very often then I'll send out that scene to the director so they can look at it at night, or we'll work together on the weekend sometimes. Just, you know, so they've got some feedback on how the film is coming along as they're shooting. And I'll get feedback from them as to what they're really looking for in the film from my editing. So it sort of goes both ways.
And how much music is so integral to a movie and actually helps sometimes, you know, the actors in terms of the scene. I guess it must change film to film, but how much is composed before and then after?
mostly it's after.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you're sending.
Like Zach Braff in Garden State, where he had
yeah. If you have on-camera stuff, that's different. But
Yeah.
sometimes composers are sending the editors material as they're editing, if you're already hired. But sometimes you don't get hired till afterwards, and they usually edit to music. Is that correct?
Yes, we do what's called a temp score usually. I had a film that I did this spring with an English composer named Dickon Hinchcliffe, and he had previously done some movies for Claire Denis, so we had her soundtracks to work with for our temp score. And then once we had a cut, we sent it to Dickon in England. He did all the work in England and came over and met with us later.
Can that be difficult because
Temp scores are a double-edged thing, because on the one hand, it's a great clue as to what the director's looking for. You can kind of jump to write. You know, you don't have to hit a lot of foul balls to get to the place where they want to go. But on the other hand, sometimes they get so, they've seen it 100 times, they've edited to it, and they kind of fixate on it. And it's very hard sometimes to write something that isn't the temp that's doing what it needs to be doing. So
there's
it's a challenge.
There's so many new tools for editing and music and what you do. How are you approaching your work, or does it change the way you're approaching your work now? Does it help, or do you kind of go back and you're like, oh, I loved it back in the old school days, or you didn't have all this, all this stuff?
Well, I mean, for me, the tools are great because if I'm working on a scene, I just did a film called Love is Strange for Ira Sachs, which is here. And,
congratulations.
Thanks. We're premiering tonight. the Eccles Theater, and I was working on a scene in the assembly where in the script it talked about choral music, some church music, and one of the characters in the film is a choir director for a Catholic school. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to try some church music here, but I don't know much about that. So I wrote to someone who worked with Sue Jacobs, who was our music supervisor. His name was Rich Forrester, and I said, Rich, do you have anything? And with like an hour, I had all these files just that I could download from him, and I was able to cut the scene.
And likewise with the computing, with the composing technology that exists now, it really allows you to, in a funny way, it allows you to be intuitive, because you can improvise and do all kinds of stuff, and it'll capture it, then you can mess around with it. Same time, I also like to use pencil and paper, you know, when I'm starting out on something.
Yeah, I'm sure it's interesting to look at the up-and-coming editors and composers and seeing how they're approaching their work this day and age. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, the problem, one of the problems is that the technology is so good that it saves people. On a low-budget film, you can simulate live instruments with sampled instruments, and it's not the same thing. It loses the warmth and the humanity that the live instruments bring. So even though it's a great thing to be able to produce full orchestra tracks, you hope that that's in the to replace it when it comes time to finish the movie.
Definitely. We actually have a question from Twitter from @BrookeShepard, who wants to know, how much collaboration do you want during editing and composing with the directors and producers? And how much do you, as composers and editors, also collaborate?
Well, I want a lot of feedback, because you know, the more I get, the closer I'll get to the final product, and then there won't be any surprises. You know, if you're in a recording studio with live musicians sitting there, the last thing in the world you want is something that isn't working to picture. So you want I want all that. I want all those. You know, if I play something for the director and they say I like it, and I could tell they don't really like it, I want to know what it is they're not liking, and I want to get it to that point as early as possible to save the time and stress for later.
Mm-hmm. And you know, very often we're trying to find out what pieces are going to work in a film, or how much music we're going to have, and we do a lot of feedback screenings. You know, quite typically 4 or 5 during the length of the edit, and we'll ask people afterwards, how did you feel about the music? And we might change it out each week, try some new things, or put a little less in and see if the film still works that way. So it's helpful.
Well, we so appreciate you both being here. Congratulations on your movie. Really excited to see it premiering, of course, tonight. I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot about it online. And thanks to all of you for joining us and sharing your questions and thoughts about the filmmaking process. This has been a great conversation. It really does take a village to create a meaningful and powerful film. So we appreciate you being here today. Also, big shout out to our friends and partners here, YouTube, Weber Shandwick, Canon, HP, and Adobe Creative Cloud for making our Live at Sundance broadcast possible. Personally, I'm so excited for tomorrow's huge show. Want to hear who's coming up? Yes?
Who's coming?
You seem very excited. We'll have some big interviews for you guys, including Laggy's director, Lynn Shelton, as well as Eddie Moretti from Vice is going to be here. That should be fun, interviewing the director and some of the cast from Fishing Without Nets. So that will be exciting, and Vice guys are always crazy. We'll also talk to a few folks from Whiplash. And remember that you can enjoy 15 short films on the Sundance Institute YouTube channel right now, where the short with the highest views will win an audience award. So please join us, be part of that process. Until then, I'm Shira Lazar from What's Trending saying peace out from Sundance. See you guys soon.